Good evening and welcome to HC Highlanders Live. I'm Jason Muker, Associate AD for Compliance and Communication, joined by our Athletic Director, Matthew Webb. It's Wednesday, October 21st. We're almost 2 months into our semester, and we continue to enjoy a different semester here. A lot of different things happening across the NCAA, across the conferences in the Northeast. Some news from some conferences just across the state, from the SUNYAC that has changed the landscape of intercollegiate athletics a little bit for the spring and winter. We are still anticipating moving forward with a schedule of fall sports, winter sports, and spring sports during our spring semester. And so we're hopeful for everything continuing that way. The NCAA continues to come out with new things related to game operations and how sports should respond from a healthcare standpoint during games and practices. And one thing that they did come out with today, thanks to our conference, the Empire 8 conference, an initial step on allowing all athletes who are participating this year to get another year of eligibility next year. So even if they play in games this year, it won't count against them. That still has to go through the President's Council, but has taken a great step. And we owe a lot to Chuck Matrano and the Empire 8 Conference for spearheading that proposal. And our teams are practicing. Some have actually wrapped up their fall practice seasons. Others are continuing on and have some inter-squad scrimmage going up as they go through the different phases of participation and practice. And I'll let Matt talk a little bit more about that and introduce our guests for this evening. Matt, take it away.
Thanks, Jason. So it's good to be back again. And like Jason said, these days it's constant new information. Institutions making decisions about the winter and spring sports. And like Jason said, our conference continues to be pushing real hard and exploring the testing options that are out there. The commissioner of our conference, Chuck Matrano, has been just really, really good, a strong leader in researching and presenting different options that we would have to sort of meet the NCAA requirements or recommendations, I guess I should say, in terms of testing as it pertains to competing in athletics this next semester. So as Jason said, some of our teams have actually wrapped up their practice seasons for this fall. Volleyball is done. Both men's and women's tennis are done. Softball is finished. And men's soccer and field hockey are in their final week, I believe, this week. Baseball is nearing the end. They may have one more week. Basketball, unlike any of our other sports, wasn't allowed to start until October 1. That was an NCAA regulation. So they actually just started a couple weeks ago, and they're going in November. So they're fully ramped up and practicing right now. Men and women are both in phase 2 of our sort of phases of competition and what practices can look like. And we continue to be doing well. Some of the other institutions in our conference and nearby schools and other conferences have had, I think, more challenges with COVID and positive tests on campus. And to date, we still have had no positive tests for many of our students, and we're really thankful for that. Some information that actually came out today in a conference call with Dr. Hainline, who is the chief medical professional that represents the NCAA. He told folks that were on the call, of which Deanna Hand, who is our head athletic trainer, associate AD in that area, was on the call. He communicated that to date in the NCAA as a whole nationwide, there have been no positive cases that have been traced back to as a result of practicing or competing. So the athletic competition and practice hasn't been the cause of any of the positive cases. They've all been from social gatherings and parties and those sorts of things. So that's pretty encouraging news as far as I'm concerned in terms of the future of athletics and being able to participate here. So in any case, we're moving along, and things continue to be going relatively well. And so that's not to say that there aren't stressors involved, and our guest this evening can probably speak to that from a faculty perspective. We've got a faculty member on for tonight, and I'll introduce him here shortly. But our students as a whole continue to be very resilient. Our faculty and staff continue to be very resilient. It is tiring. It's challenging. But in so many ways, I continue to be very proud to be working at Houghton with just really good professionals across the board. And to some degree, I think adrenaline is kicking in, but there's a passion for serving our students and wanting to make the experience as good as we possibly can, given the limitations and restrictions that are upon us because of COVID. And couldn't be any prouder of our students also, who just are really being resilient and making it work. And so it's really good to see. So this evening, I want to introduce you to one of our longtime faculty members here at the college. Professor Doug Gaerte is a communications professor and has been here. Oh, I didn't do that sort of research, but has been here a long time. I want to say you've been here as long or longer than I've been here. I've been here
33 years.
33 years. So I was going to say, I thought you guys were already here when we came. And I've had the privilege of getting to know Doug in a variety of contexts, both serving on the church board together. Doug is currently the faculty moderator, so he runs our faculty meetings at the college, and like I said, has been a longtime professor in the communication department and a favorite of many of our students. My own children who've come through Houghton, two of my kids anyway, had him for quite a few classes, and I know they loved their experience sitting in on Doug Gaerte's classes. So Doug, thanks for being with us tonight. And most of the guests that we've had have been probably a little more closely connected to the athletic department in the sense of they were either athletes themselves or former athletes at Houghton or coaches. So you're the first of a little different sort of dynamic to join us tonight. But I know you're a sports fan, and I want to dig into that a little bit too. Maybe we can talk Indiana hoops for a little bit, or but I guess I'd be interested as an initial to kick us off. Why don't you just tell us a little bit of your background and your story in terms of your journey to Houghton? And if you want to go from there into, what is it that you love about being at Houghton? You've been here a long time. What is it you like best about working at this place?
Sure. Thanks, Matt. And thanks for having me on tonight. I grew up in Indiana. And of course, in Indiana, we love our basketball. So that's always been an interest of mine. I did my undergraduate work at Grace College in northern Indiana, which is a school very much like Houghton in many ways. And then did my graduate work at Indiana University. And while we were at Indiana University, as my wife Phyllis and I were thinking about where do we want to spend our lives, we had both had such a tremendous experience in our own undergraduate work at a Christian institution where we got to know our faculty members and build relationships. And we said that's where the kind of place that we wanted to be. And so I actually just sent out a whole bunch of blind letters, which every career counselor says that never is successful. But it was. And one of them came to Houghton. And so I interviewed here during what was my third year in graduate school. They had a retirement that was coming up. And so I came out and interviewed and had a great experience. And they called me back to say, we'd be interested in having you come. At that point, I was finishing up my coursework, getting close to finishing my coursework for my PhD. And so I said to the chair of the department at the time there at Houghton, boy, if I could have one more year of graduate work, I could get all of my coursework done, finish with my exams, and it would make it a whole lot easier. So the person who was going to retire, Ruth Hutton, longtime members of the community would know Ruth, she agreed so graciously to teach an extra year. And so I had a position sort of waiting for me, which made it really nice. My last year of working on coursework and working for exams, I didn't have to, wasn't beating the trail trying to find a job. I could concentrate on my schoolwork. So we came here then in the fall of 1988 I was ABD, so the first years that we were here, I frantically was working all summer on my dissertation. But we've been here ever since. My wife, Phyllis, many of our students would know and alumni would know. She's our alumni director here at the college. And so Houghton has been a great place. Both of our kids went here and had great experiences. It was funny, and I don't know, Matt, what if you did this with your own children. I didn't want my kids to necessarily think that they had to come to Houghton by default. We encouraged them to look at other places. But as my son said after visiting a few schools, he said, "Dad, why would I want to go anywhere else? I know these professors because they were friends of ours," and he said, "I know the kind of education that I'm going to get here." So both of our kids ended up coming to Houghton, and so it was a blessing to watch them sort of have that experience that so many Houghton students have had, and it's been a great place. I work with wonderful colleagues. I think you'd ask, what is it that keeps us here? It's been our students, and we just have great kids to work with. Many of them have become friends. Many of them I continue to stay in touch with. I was on the phone for about an hour and 15 minutes this week with one of my graduates who now is a professor at another Christian college, and we were swapping stories about things we're doing in class, and we share syllabi with each other, and it's those kinds of relationships that I think are so meaningful.
Yeah, I resonate with that. I think I tell people all the time, one of my favorite things, and you and I've been here long enough now that we get these phone calls, but from an alum to say, hey, coach, for me, it was coach for a lot of years. Hey, coach, want to let you know I'm getting married. Or, hey, coach, I want to let you know, we're expecting our first baby. Yeah. And wanting to just let us know of those milestones in their lives. And I think you're right. It's the relationships with the students that just are so meaningful and rewarding, and that drives many of us in terms of our motivation to be here.
And I think, Matt, you even see it and you mentioned earlier how we haven't had any positive cases on campus, and I give our students so much credit for that. I even see them walking by themselves outside away from anybody, and they're wearing a mask. And I have 5 classes this fall. I have about 100 students between all of those classes. I have only one time had to remind a student about, put your mask up. And so it's that kind of conscientiousness. I had some friends at other schools say, are you nervous about going back this fall? And how long do you think, your school will last, as other schools were sort of dropping by the wayside and going online? I said, well, Houghton students are different students. And I said, yeah, they're 18 and 19 years old. But I think they're also more responsible than most. And I think part of the big factor was they genuinely wanted to be back together. They wanted to be back together with each other. They wanted to be back together with their professors. And I think they're willing to make the commitment that's needed and to exercise the discipline that makes that happen. So.
Yeah, that's a sentiment that we talk about in our department. One of our coaches in particular has really been preaching this with their team, that wearing a mask and doing practice a little bit differently, it's a sacrifice for the greater good. Yeah. Would you rather be together, or would you rather not be together at all? Be together with some inconvenience, or not be able to play. And that's sort of the, and they want to be together. In fact, our athletes have shared the sentiment that practice this fall, although we're not competing, not playing any games this fall, they're practicing, and they are enjoying for the most part, valuing practice a whole lot more than normal, because of that's the time they get to be with their friends. It's a social activity in addition to the sport and getting to play your sport.
Sure.
It's when they get to be together, because they're not able to be together quite the same outside.
No, classes are difficult that way.
Yeah.
So practices make that possible.
So, Doug, I didn't give you this in my script for questions for tonight, but give us a glimpse of what it's been like for faculty to make the adjustments that you've had to make, and just the teaching environment. Just give us a glimpse of what those challenges have been like. And I know, the majority of our faculty are doing it really well, are making it work. and there's challenges with it and limitations with it, but just give us maybe a little insight into what that's been like for the life of a faculty member this semester.
Well, I am really proud of my colleagues. I know, I mean, there is sort of the perception that, oh, it'd be nice to be a faculty member because you have your summers free. And that's never the case. We're always working over the summer with new things. But this summer was exceptionally so. And I know that a lot of my colleagues were doing webinars to sort of come up to speed with different approaches that they could use. I did about a 3-week intensive course on how to use Moodle, which is our sort of our class management system more effectively. So people were retooling classes to make sure that they could sort of overcome some of the limitations that we had. And then some of the limitations or some of the challenges presented themselves quite late. And as you mentioned earlier, the ground is sort of constantly shifting. So in the last week before classes started, we found out that because of regulations in terms of contact tracing, that we were not allowed to have class contact any longer than an hour with the students. So, for a regular 50-minute class that meets, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, that's not a big deal. But for all of our science labs, for a lot of the courses in my department, in our computer lab, the Mac Studio, where we do a lot of our digital media courses and things, most of those classes are set up to meet twice a week for 2 hours at a time, because a professor can do a demonstration and then is there as students work on their projects and can be there. So it meant with just a few days before the semester, for so many of my colleagues, totally redoing their class and figuring out, how do I present this content when I have half the face time that I'm normally used to, or with the science lab that might be a 3-hour-long lab. How can I do that in an hour? And so, people got very creative with recording things. I know my one colleague who teaches in the studio, she does the first half of her class sort of live on Zoom, and students tune in, and she does all of her demo stuff. And then for the second hour of class, they come into the lab and she's available there to help. I know our science faculty broke up their labs into smaller sections, and they've staggered the start time. Some of them have to meet with students out in the hall in order to stay out of the classroom for the appropriate amount of time. So it's presented significant challenges. I'll just say, in my 33 years of teaching, it's been the most difficult semester that I have ever had. And I think many of my colleagues would say that we're exhausted, but we're also so glad to be here and with our students. I think for many of us, last spring was profoundly lonely. I'm sitting up in my spare bedroom videotaping lectures and posting them on YouTube, and it's just not the same. So even though I'm looking out at a half-filled classroom because of capacity limits of students wearing masks and things, it's just so nice to have them here.
So you're a communications person. That's your field. One of the things that I've thought, and I was an undergrad communications person, so I dabble in it. But what's it like in class, interacting with students, where nonverbals and facial expression is so key for so much of communication? That's one of the things I find most challenging in talking with folks face to face. I don't know if they're smiling or not. Sometimes you can tell by your eyes. But what's that like in class in terms of trying to get feedback and interact? And you can't, they don't know if you're smiling or not. And it's maybe you're joking, maybe you're not joking. If I can see your mouth, I know if you're joking or not.
The biggest change actually that I notice is even before class starts, because usually, and I have a rule in my classes normally, that when you walk in the door, your phone goes away. Because what I want is, in those 5 or 10 minutes before class starts, I want people talking to each other. I don't want everybody sitting on their phone. The masks profoundly inhibit that. And so I've dropped the phone regulation this semester, because with the mask, you're much more hesitant to talk to each other. It's harder to talk to each other. You're sitting 6 feet away. So everybody can even hear your conversation if you're trying to talk to them. And we also, because of that 60-minute rule, students aren't able to even come really very early to class. So, kids are showing up 2 or 3 minutes before class rather than 10 minutes. So it's really strange to stand in front of a classroom and hear dead silence.
Yeah.
And then in my communication classes, we do so much group work. I'm always, so talk to a couple people next to you and let's talk about this issue and think of an example where this sort of happened. And when I have a combination of students who are in person and online at the same time, that's really challenging. So
yeah, I'm sure. Well, let's get back to athletics here a little bit.
Sure.
I'd be interested in hearing from you from a faculty perspective. And we've got nearing 30% of our student body now are student athletes. What's that dynamic like? What does the student athlete perspective bring to the student perspective as a whole? What sort of dynamic does that bring to the classroom? You've got a class of 30 students, and you might have 6, 7, 8 of them are student athletes. What's been your experience as a professor in terms of what do student athletes bring that's unique or different?
Well, quite a few. I mean, our students are student athletes, and so there are a lot of times where I don't even know in my class, particularly who are the athletes or not, unless it's one of the teams that I tend to follow a little bit more, or they're my advisees and people that I've gotten to know sort of outside of class. So there are a lot of times that I don't even know specifically who are the athletes.
Mm-hmm.
But I think one of the things that I'm so impressed by our student athletes is they're good students. And I don't know if this is still the case. I know historically the student athlete GPA has been higher than the general student GPA. And I don't know if that's consistently that case, but I know on many teams that's certainly the case. Well, one of the things that I have found interesting as I've gotten to know my student athletes a little bit, I love to talk with them about, what's it like for you when you're in season versus out of season. And one of the things that I think the athletics provides is a sense of discipline. And I've had a lot of student athletes tell me over the years, and I've actually seen it at times in their work, that they're more on top of things and they turn things in more on time when they are in season than when they're out of season, because when they're in season, they have to be disciplined. They have to use their time. They have to take advantages of all those moments during the day when they can squeeze in a little bit of work because they know, they've got a road trip or they've got practices and things. And that once the season's done, it's like, wow, I've got all this free time. And in some ways, and I think we're all like that. When I was in college, I did drama. And I know, in those weeks where we were focused on the play, and I was putting in lots and lots of hours on the play set, I always had my work done. But after the play, it was kind of like, I've got a breather here, and it's
I can procrastinate.
Yeah, easy because I got the time to procrastinate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I was a fall sports student athlete when I was in college doing my undergrad, and that was definitely the case for me. I did better in the fall than in the spring. And I think we find that to be not across the board the case, but generally speaking, that's what we find. And so our anticipation is that this spring, because in the spring, all of our student athletes, that's when they'll be competing. Everybody's going to do better in the spring.
Right. Good.
So
that's a promise from the athletic department.
There we go. Guarantee. Athletic director said it here. Yeah, they're going to do better. So, yeah. So, Doug, let's talk baseball a little bit. I know we've had a team. Oh goodness, it's maybe been the past 4 or 5 years now. We've had one of our the Genesee Rapids a summer.
We've actually had 6 seasons.
6 seasons, and so this past summer they didn't play because of COVID stuff. But I know you have served. I don't know if you have done it every summer, but you've been the play-by-play announcer, and I can actually hear you from my house when there's a baseball game. And I'll just say, in future years, you need to say the score because we can't see the scoreboard from our house.
Your wife told me that too.
Yeah,
that I don't announce the score enough, and I want to say to her, "Well, come to the game, and then you can see the scoreboard." So
we can hear it from the house. So we don't. Yeah. So, but talk with us about just sort of that interest of merging a little bit your appreciation for sports and baseball, and being able to announce. And I know we've dabbled a little bit with maybe doing some of the Houghton games, which is a little more challenging because we're in the semester and you're teaching classes and so forth. But I know that's something you've really enjoyed in recent years, is being involved with the Rapids.
Sure. Well, I've always loved baseball. I don't watch a lot of baseball on TV, but I love to go to a ballpark. It's my favorite thing. That's of all the things that we sort of miss in this pandemic time. I told my wife on a number of occasions I would give anything to spend an evening up in Rochester at a Rochester Red Wings game. Eating a hot dog and watching a baseball game. So about 7 years ago now, I guess, when Ralph Kerr here in town of the Kerr Pagula Athletic Complex fame, when he was thinking about starting a team here in Houghton, part of the New York Collegiate Baseball League, he approached me to see if I would be willing to do PA sort of announcing for the games. And I said, Ralph, I've never done anything like that, but I love baseball. I'd be interested in doing it. I, of course, as a communication teacher, and I teach public speaking, I'm comfortable in front of a crowd, and so I said I don't mind doing it. I'm not nervous about the public speaking part, but I've never done any baseball announcing, so it gave me an excuse that before our first season. To attend a number of Rochester Red Wings games. I told my wife Phyllis that we're doing research, so that I can do.
So you can get your hot dog at the game.
That's right. Well, I had to eat my hot dogs to get into baseball shape. But every spring too, for spring break, we always go to Charleston, South Carolina, and I always try to catch a couple of College of Charleston games down there. So I found myself much more intentionally listening to the announcers and sort of what they do and the cadence of how they do the calling. So yeah, we've done it for six summers. I really missed it this summer. It's a great time. The baseball is fun to watch, but the social part of it, and that's what is also fun about baseball. It's the kind of sport where you can sit and have a conversation with somebody. And there's several of us that work in the booth. Andrew Oden, who's one of our admissions counselors, does the play-by-play for our streaming for the games. And he's outstanding. He's so good at it. And he's so knowledgeable about baseball, and a couple of other guys in town that, do stats and the scoreboard. And we just have a great time in the booth. It's so much fun. We spend half the time laughing and just enjoying the games. And so that's been fun. And as you said, I've been able to do a few of the college games. Not as consistently because of weather in Western New York in the spring is often challenging. There have been a few times where, I've lined up a game with Jason and then it got canceled because it was, snowing. And so I haven't always been able to do this, but I've done several games and it's been fun. I've actually last year did a couple of games with one of my students, Scotty Berghaus, who also is one of our basketball players. And so Scotty and I got to do a game together, and that was a whole lot of fun.
Yeah, that's great. Going to a baseball game, there's nothing quite like it. And I'm not a huge baseball fan, but I would concur. It's, aside from maybe going to a soccer game, which is what I really love, going to the ballpark and getting a bag of peanuts and a hot dog, it's just a lot of fun. And you're right. So, hey, we do need to wrap up, but I'd be remiss if I didn't talk a little bit of Indiana basketball and Indiana sports. I know you're an Indiana hoops fan, and I'm not really up on Indiana sports right now. I know when I was coaching, you'd occasionally come to me and give me an update on Indiana soccer. And so when you were following the soccer program also, I thought, well, this guy's a diehard Indiana person. But what does Indiana hoops have to be looking forward to these days? Are they,
Matt, I have to admit, Matt, this would cause my grandmother's incredible grief for me to say this. I don't follow IU hoops quite as closely as I used to, partly because my parents have moved from Indiana. They're now in Houghton. But I used to keep in touch with basketball from my grandmothers. Both of my grandmas were diehard Hoosier fans. And after we moved to Houghton, and of course we didn't have nearly the coverage out here that you would get when we lived in Indiana. I would call my one grandma every Saturday morning and she would give me the update, and she'd say, well, the transition defense didn't look so great last night. The perimeter worked really good. And, and she's 80 years old. And so since they've both passed away, I don't have my sources of information. But you will be proud to know that I actually follow IU soccer pretty faithfully.
How are they doing? I don't even know how they're doing.
they've had a great team. Of course, as you know, I think they've won 7 or 8 national championships, and I think they may have been in the title game last year. But no, they're good. We went to every home soccer game in the 4 years that I was there in grad school, and I had a couple of kids that played soccer, including Pete Stoyanovich, who went on to he was the place kicker for the Miami Dolphins and the Kansas City Chiefs. And
I was gonna say I recognize that name.
yeah, he played soccer. I had him in public speaking class, and so it was fun to kind of follow his career too. But the IU soccer team, as probably of all the Indiana sports teams, been the most successful, and
sure,
over an extended period of time.
Yeah, there was a long history. I'm trying to remember their longtime coach,
Jerry Yeagley.
Yeagley,
and then
right.
his son coached there. There.
Right. Well, Doug, thanks for being with us tonight. I just thanks for the investment that you make in our students' lives, and I mean, I can speak to that from personal experience, just knowing how my daughters in particular appreciated you as an advisor. I want to say you were one of my daughters' advisor. I think you were Esther's advisor, both of them. And I just know they really enjoyed having you as a professor. In fact, I was on the phone with Emma a little bit before this call, and I said, "Hey, I got to go. We're interviewing Professor Gaerte." "Oh, I like him. You know." So, but I know that's not just my 2 daughters. There's a widespread appreciation.
Well, and what's neat, Matt, and this is how Houghton alumni sort of give back. So in one of my classes, I have students, they have to conduct an informational interview. And one of my students is interested in some of the same areas that your daughters are interested in. So I called both Emma and Esther and said, "Hey, can I connect you with one of my current students?" And immediately their response was absolutely. And so the student, had an interview with both of them and had a wonderful time. And so it's that sort of giving back that I think is again reflects that that sense of real connection and relationship that we have here, that our former students love to connect with our current students, and that passes on.
Yeah, no, that's great. I appreciate you saying that. Well, thanks again, Doug. It's been good to catch up a little bit tonight. We don't
good to see you too,
we don't
Matt.
see each other enough in person, but it's good to see you, and I hope you stay well.
Thanks
Again. You bet.
Take care.